imagine a great deal will need to change first, and I hope that it does. I'm also requesting that we enable the audit department, our audit department, with the resources necessary to move forward in a timely manner with these kinds of investigations in the future. That's the document with just a few words on it before you here. I'm asking the mayor's office in her next budgeting process to ensure discretionary funding for the audit department to use these sorts of to use for these sorts of complaint-driven investigations. What we've found and other things that have come forward is that a department asks for audit's help on something, and then when they find that our audit department has such a tiny budget, then they back away because it hasn't been appropriated yet in their own department's budget. So I feel this step is crucial for maintaining the integrity of the department and the speed at which we can go and look into claims that warrant more investigation. And I think it's important for the integrity of the city. The referral before you simply asks that we include an ongoing means to investigate emergent issues of fraud, waste, and abuse like this. It might even work out such that we can continue to use contingency dollars in the way that we have done here. But I just want that to be explicit. And Mr. Ruff had hoped to be here today. He's not able to be here, our financial officer, but I know he will be working on this with Mr. Tetzel as well. So first, may I have a motion to receive this internal audit report, the TMO internal audit report, direct staff to publish the report and refer it to City Council?
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of that motion, please say aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it, and that report will be received, and staff will publish it. With the experience gained during audit, I will also make this motion before you that is a referral to the mayor. That is part of our ordinance that we are allowed to make budget requests to the mayor. And given the time of year, I think it's just important for her to have as she develops her next budget. So I will also make the motion of the sheet of paper before you of the referral to the mayor.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it, and that staff direction has been adopted. Mr. Fisher and committee members, I do plan to take those other concerns forward to council for their actions about the future of our participation in the TMO. Mr. Fisher, do you have a question?
Yes, Madam Chair. I'm not sure this isn't within the purview of the committee, but is this a document which should also refer to the Metropolitan Council, which is the other contracting party to this particular contract? Or does the City Council take that action?
I would take the recommendations for that, and we could also send this report, do you mean, to the Met Council? I have been in conversation with Metro Transit, who works with this. Mr. Tetzel, do you have any comments about that?
Madam Chair, Mr. Fisher, I've been keeping their Director of Internal Audit appraised of where we are in this process and the results that we're seeing. They're a stakeholder in this. We have a contract with them as it relates to this matter, and so they've been appraised of what we're seeing and what we're finding, and we'll have obviously access to the audit report, but other information as they deem fit.
Councilmember Quincy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm guessing we can take this formal action, but I know our departments are already connected with this work. We know the Public Works Department is certainly going to be involved in this. We know the Finance Department is very involved in this as they're monitoring how the money moves through and how they're accounting for it. And then the other organization within our institution that should be involved would be the Intergovernment Relations Committee. So I'm sure by forwarding this action through, as you've just proposed, what we're going to be doing is the appropriate people will be taking actions that are appropriate to the city operations. We're not going to be able to dictate to an outside agency or another stakeholder agency what they should do with it, but I think we're going to be making any information available to them at their request. But we're going to be taking care of our own operations and how we're going to be treating it. Just wanted to make sure that was clear. It's not our job to do Met Council work or the state of Minnesota work, it's city of Minneapolis.
Mr. Fisher?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. The report, as I read it, really doesn't have any recommendations of what to do with it, and so I wouldn't propose anything of that nature. But it would occur to me, and I would look to the guidance of the rest of the committee here, that they have the impetus of the committee action direct or asking that this report be submitted to the Metropolitan Council may just add weight to it. Rather than, I'm sure that they're going to be reviewing the report as a contracting partner. I'm sure the other city committees will as well. But just to add to perhaps the weight of that, the findings, because I find these quite alarming, quite numerous, quite alarming, that just to add the weight of the committee behind it seems to be appropriate.
I would entertain that as a motion to also send this report to Met Council. I think that's appropriate. We aren't recommending them do follow-up or tracking their follow-up, but I think that we should do that in the spirit of full disclosure and in sharing, because we ended up needing to do quite a bit of work on this topic. Do I have a second on that?
Second, or I can't make the second.
Yeah, you made the motion.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. I also want to note, colleagues, that we will discuss the next steps that were taken as a result of this audit report at our next meeting. So you'll see a continuation and follow-up of that. It will be listed on your agenda under announcements at our next meeting. Next on our agenda, moving on, is a staff direction. At a meeting last year, we heard from our internal audit department about our records management audit. Since I also serve on the Public Safety Committee alongside Councilmember Quincy, I have shared my concerns about our ability to properly manage the records that will result from implementation of our police department's body camera policy. Councilmember Quincy, you may recall in some of the deliberations and conversations from our Police Conduct and Oversight Commission that they have some recommendations. And while we don't yet have final guidance on what the protocol will be for body cameras, one of the things that I felt appropriate to take from that Police Conduct and Oversight Commission and to put into Audit's bucket is the motion that's just being passed out before you now. But I do think that it warrants public oversight, and I think it does warrant audit. It audits look to consider going back approximately 6 months after our body cameras roll out to take a look at it and this is a direction to work it into to next year's audit work plan that would address one of the PCOC's concerns, which is how are our police adhering to the standard operating protocol that ends up being deployed to our body camera policy, meaning do police officers, are they getting the right kind of consent if and when they need to? Are they turning them on? Are they turning them off when it is appropriate? So in conversation with our internal audit department, we felt that this would be most appropriate and most scoped right, and it would be working somehow into our 2017 audit work plan an examination of the adherence to operating procedures, including but not limited to sampling camera footage to examine whether or not that policy was adhered to, making sure that data within it is classified appropriately, meaning if there's incident data that it's classified as incident data and therefore retained for the right amount of time. Ensuring that there's appropriate access to data, meaning that those that are not allowed to see or to edit footage don't have access to it. And generally to develop a program to assess the risk on controls on an ongoing annual basis to adhere to that adopted policy that we don't yet have, but we will before we roll out body cameras at internal audit's discretion. I think it's important that it's at internal audit's discretion here, and that we find some tangible way to work it into the 2017 work plan. Thoughts, comments?
Madam Chair, I was wondering, has this been discussed with the Minneapolis Police Department, Mayor's Office, City Attorney's Office? Is this actually under the purview of the Audit Committee, or is this something that we should be in support of another department's request? What are we
Councilmember
doing?
Quincy, I have been in conversation with Deputy Chief Glampy about this and actually some additional, more robust kinds of analyses of our body camera program once it rolls out. I do think that the only appropriate department to audit something like body camera footage from our police department would be internal audit instead of the police internally looking at that. I mean, they will. That's going to be in the state legislation that's coming forward, but this will be that additional oversight that the Police Conduct Oversight Commission requested.
So no,
Does
we
that
haven't
answer
talked to
your
the
question?
Mayor's Office or
We have
Police
not
Department besides
spoken
Chief
to
Glampy?
the mayor's office, and we have been in conversation with it with Deputy Chief Glampy, but not the police chief herself.
And the City Attorney's Office? We haven't had that conversation either?
No, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if we've had those conversations. I have not personally had those conversations. Okay. So this is a potential staff direction. If people are not yet fully comfortable with it, we could hold it over a cycle because, again, it wouldn't happen until the body-worn camera program is fully deployed for at least 6 months. So if there's concerns about it, I'm happy to hold it over. Otherwise, we could try to move forward and see about the motion. Mr. Quincy, or Councilmember, what's your...
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't want to hold it up. Certainly, we're talking about amending a 2000 or incorporating it into the 2017 work plan, which hasn't been fleshed out yet. There's plenty of room for conversation about what's appropriate. I guess I would like to add that it's in coordination with the Minneapolis Police Department and the City Attorney's Office, rather than something the Audit Department has chosen to take on its own, although that they would be the responsible group to do the audit. I mean, who else would do it? That seems appropriate. But just to impose that without the consultation of the department, I think would be just a bit of an overreach at this point. But it's something that we can certainly have conversation on for the next 6 months, including the budget.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So how about if we look to amend this motion by adding the language in coordination with the mayor's office, the city attorney, and the Minneapolis Police Department? Great. So a second of this motion as amended.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Quincy. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Madam Chair, as a new member here, I'm just so unaware of the circumstance behind this, I'm going to abstain from this vote at this point. Thank you.
Thank you for noting that. I meant to continue to ask for abstentions as appropriate. So thank you. So it looks as though there are 3 ayes, 1 abstention. So the ayes have it, and this is adopted. Let's see. Finally, Mr. Tetzel, you've prepared an update for the Audit Committee on the rest of your work plan. Mr. Tetzel?
Madam Chair, thank you. I'll make this quick. Wanted to quickly give you a project update on our plan so far this year. So we've completed the employee separation analysis. We've completed the neighborhood programming and support audit and the DMTMO third-party audit. The audits that are in progress currently are CPED loan programs, IT projects management, license plate reader readiness, PeopleSoft finance and access and security, PeopleSoft web portal, police records management implementation consultation, and the procure to pay audit. The 4 projects that we have yet to start are civil rights contract compliance, MPD third-party audit, Park and Recreation Board worker safety, and police body camera pre-requirement review, which, to Mr. Quincy's concern, might shed some light on some of the points that might overlap with the PCOC or other risks that we see. And so I'll remind the Audit Committee that I think the pending legislation has a triannual independent audit requirement for for body cameras, once that language gets more formalized, we can determine an audit plan, and then maybe at that point we can discuss the frequency with which we do other body camera related work or check-ins. Maybe that 3 years is appropriate. Maybe we want to move it around a little bit, but they'll at least be for that minimum requirement through legislation every third year to have an audit of certain aspects of the body camera. This just shows some of the changes to the audit plan language. The changes are in red. Another item that we've been asked to do is provide updates to the state auditor findings. These are almost a year old now, and the new findings will come out here in June, it looks like, from the state auditors. But nearly everything is corrected. There might be some things this might change. This is corroboration from the city's controller. The prompt payment of invoices, which started in 2009, will be an ongoing finding. It's a tough one. We're getting better at it, but it's a difficult thing to do when sometimes invoices don't go to the right people, and they need to figure out who should approve it, and sometimes they're very complex invoices. So this is something that I don't expect to ever be fully rectified, but the fact that we're getting better at it is great. We are trying to discover the root cause of some of this in our procure to pay audit, and we'll share some of those details at the July meeting there. Some follow-ups from the prior audit team. There are 2 outstanding findings. 4 of them were incorporated into findings from the records management audit, so that was great. They're the same topic, and 1 finding was incorporated into one of the state auditor findings. Findings follow up from audits that this team has produced. There were 2 audits in 2015 that produced 26 findings. I won't go into the detail. Most of those are from records management. Some of them are from the HR personnel files. Expect that follow-up become a larger part of our discussion going forward as we start to build this population of outstanding findings that we're following up on. It'll take more and more of our time to make sure those are followed up on, and I want to emphasize the importance from my perspective, and hopefully yours, that finding follow-up is taken seriously. When you do audits and make recommendations and people agree with them and you never follow up, eventually people understand that you never follow up, and there's not as much weight to the findings. And so this will continue to be, or this will gain a little bit of traction and become a larger and larger part of our discussion. I'm assuming it'll plateau at some point when we just only get so many audits done and we're clearing findings off at the same time. But this will start to become an important conversation now that we've got outstanding findings and the departments are working on remediating those. This is a continuation of that.
Thank you, Mr. Tetzel. Are there any questions or comments from committee in regards to that work plan or update? Thank you. With that completed, may I have a motion to receive and file the internal auditor's update?
So moved.
It's been moved, and could I have a second?
Second.
Great. It's been moved and seconded to receive and file these reports. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it, and these reports are received and filed. Before we adjourn, I apologize in trying to come up with the most logical order to our day and being able to introduce our new committee member. I did gloss over item number 7, and so that is still outstanding. With your permission, I'd like us to be able to go back to new business item number 7, which is the internal audit charter. Mr. Tetzel.
Thank you. Keeping me on my toes this morning. Almost this afternoon. Audit charters are typical in audit organizations. Mostly I've seen them in the private sector, but I think I wanted to put together this document mainly for the relationship between the audit committee and the auditor. This isn't meant to supersede the ordinance or override the ordinance in any way. This is meant to clarify some of the generalized language in the ordinance. I think the charter that you hopefully have in front of you better spells out what you can expect from the internal audit department and the director of internal audit, and in a way that can be incorporated into performance evaluations and questions that you guys have moving forward. Typically, audit charters are reevaluated on an annual or biannual basis to make sure that they're still in line with the goals of the internal audit department and the needs of the enterprise. And so happy to do that as well. I want to make sure that we're focused on where we can add value to the city, and that there is some sort of mechanism for people to more clearly understand what the internal auditor does here and how we work with the audit committee as well.
Thank you. Questions, comments?
That was well done.
You want to say it in the mic?
I thought it was well done. Thank you. Thanks for doing it.
Mr. Fisher?
Forgot to wave my thing. Thank you, Madam Chair. I do find this is well done. It clarifies for certainly a new member how we're going to track this. I just had two additional thoughts for future committee consideration. In most organizations I've been with, we also have an audit committee charter that kind of tracks some of this. This is the work plan, but then the audit committee has a role to play too. And well, there's an outline in the ordinance. I don't find that we really have a charter for the committee. And for both of those charters, at some point, this might yield a type of calendar that will give us an idea as a committee throughout a year what types of items we might be considering at each of our meetings as we go through the process, so we know what to expect, and the auditor's office then knows what to present. So those are things to consider for the future, but I certainly think this is the appropriate starting point.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. I think we should consider that in future meetings. I think those are good. That's good feedback. Any other thoughts or questions? Mr. Councilmember Quincy?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with I'll jump on the bandwagon of, I think it's a great document. Well done. I think it does help outline scope and responsibilities. It's a little more reader friendly, easier to consume and understand. But getting back to what Mr. Fisher was just saying, and it's outlined here in Mr. Tetzel's second point. This isn't superseding or replacing the ordinance, and I think a lot of what you were talking about, Mr. Fisher, in my view anyway, could be detailed in that ordinance. It says what who makes up the committee, what it's supposed to do, those kind of things. But in general terms of what we should be working on and how we're doing it, either operates under the rules of this committee or in the ordinance. But certainly we could make it a more accessible language if we wanted to take up that kind of charter activity. There is the one access, and I think we saw a great demonstration of it today in reviewing outside audits. I mean, we used Baker Tilly, we've used a cyber forensic, so it helps clarify on what an outside auditor could be and what it replaces and how it augments city operations, looking on things that aren't directly under the city of Minneapolis, but it was a great example today of the TMO work. It's fabulous. But I'm always concerned about what we're saying when we're talking about the state audit, because that's a pretty big outside auditing firm. When we're talking about what the role is of the city audit, in the ordinance it says specifically review, and I don't think the intent of what we're talking about here, I think it's under the scope area, is that we would, forgot the section, coordinate with the state auditor, external auditors to minimize duplication of efforts and maximize efficient audit coverage. I think that's well stated, and I have no problem with that. When we say of any conversation, when we're talking about the state audit as it relates to the finances of the city, that's not under the purview of this committee, but all the work that rolls out is what we can really get our teeth into, and you do a great job of. So I just wanted to make sure I was highlighting that. It supports the charter that you've presented here, but I want to make sure that this is not changing language within the ordinance that says the audit committee is in charge of the audit.
Madam Chair, if I may, Mr. Quincy, I agree, and we are in, I wouldn't say constant collaboration with the state auditors, but when I determine the work that we should do in our future audit plans, one of the things that we rely on is what the state auditors did. And so I want to avoid duplicating their work, and I think it's important that we recognize that they do good work and the city takes credit for that, and that we understand that and not sort of overburden some of the departments or processes that are getting put through the ringer, for lack of a better term. So very cognizant of that.
Great. Thank you for this work effort. Thank you. I will move a motion to adopt this as your charter. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor of this work product, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? That carries. Great. With that, colleagues, we've completed all the items on our agenda. I thank you for hanging in there with us. We try to pack these agendas full and make good use of your time, and then not have to meet as often. So seeing no further business to be presented, with only a suggestion that perhaps our internal auditor himself consider taking some of his accrued sick time, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.